Didn't do this to do any hating on anyone. I did it to be funny. I did it to be a joke. This clown bit has been around for generations, and I didn't think anything more of it than what we've done 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, when we've done it with Bush and Clinton and Ronald Reagan.
Folks, welcome back. Steve Malzberg, and that is Tuffy Gessling. And you're like, who the heck is Tuffy Gessling? You know him as the rodeo clown who wore the Obama mask and got fired, and the storm erupted. The NAACP in his home state of Missouri wanted the Justice Department and the Secret Service to investigate. Joining us now to talk about this is our friend who joins us every week on Malzberg's Media Madness, the associate editor of Newsbusters.org, Noel Sheppard. Hey, Noel.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm well.
All right. Well, great. You wrote about this, and you asked the question, will the media report on this? This was an interview he did with KCTV in Kansas City, saying there was no racism. I would do this no matter what color the president was. I don't care what color a person is. I played it yesterday, actually, I think it was, or the day before, whenever this interview came out. But I haven't seen much media response to this. They just, want to leave everybody with the impression that this guy was some kind of racist because Obama's black.
Yeah, and I think as we discussed at the time, if they had done any research, they would have found that this is rather common. This is what happens at rodeos. And we've got a rodeo where I live. There's a rodeo about, I don't know, maybe 15 miles away from here, maybe 20. And we go to it every summer. And there's always the clowns, the rodeo clowns, they wear masks, and they're very often president's masks. And it's part of the routine. Nothing shocking about it whatsoever. But you're not allowed. There's, I don't know whether you saw this. Actually, you've been on the air. Chuck Todd just talked about Obama's speech as being post-racial. That's really what he said. Obama's speech was post-racial. And as I just wrote moments ago, this president is anything but post-racial.
Oh my
He
gosh.
talks about post-racial, but everything that this man has done since, the Skip Gates affair with the Cambridge Police Department, all the way through to Trayvon Martin, has been to divide our nation along racial lines. This is how Democrats get elected, and Obama has been spectacular at it. And we've got prominent members of the black community who are coming out and admitting that we're a more racist society, or at least there's more racial tensions now than before he was elected. Well, what's the connection
Well,
here?
don't forget, Noel, by the way, you pointed out that this had been done previously at rodeos. You dug up the George H.W. Bush mask. But don't forget, the White House did weigh in on this. Instead of saying, why are you asking me about a rodeo? Or, what are you, ridiculous? What are you, crazy? He said, the White House spokesman said, it wasn't one of our better days as a nation, which just shows how crazy it is.
Well, I think what's interesting here is this Gessling, this Tuffy Gessling comes out and says, I'd love for some of our political leaders to come to a rodeo and see what happens. And if Obama showed up, I'd proudly shake his hand. What Obama could have done in this situation was say, I've never been to a rodeo. Maybe this is what happens. Let me go see. And now you're actually uniting the country, right?
Right.
Now you're bringing the entire country into the fold, rather than basically regularly saying that roughly half of the country, those that don't vote for you conveniently, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, they're all racist. This would have been a fabulous opportunity for him to truly be post-racial and say, before I make a comment here, because I've never been to a rodeo and I don't know anything about them, I'd like to go to a couple and see what happens. Wow. That would have been a uniting moment for the nation.
I couldn't agree with you more. All right, so let's move on from that to keeping with the race theme here. Unfortunately, I could pull out we could talk for the next 3 hours about how the media has gone crazy, especially in the last week with race leading up to this speech today. But let's talk about there was a guest host, I guess, on the Al Sharpton radio show. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is actually, he wasn't the guest host, but he was a guest.
Yeah, but there was a guest host
Earl.
anyway, I think. It wasn't Sharpton, unless I'm mistaken. Someone was sitting in for him, unless I'm mistaken. But nonetheless, this was Earl Ofari Hutchinson, who, as you said in your Newsbusters piece, he's one of the biggest race baiters in the nation. And he was on Sharpton's radio show. And here's some of what he had to say. This is cut number 34.
You know, when I hear these white people call in talking about what they're sick and tired of, I'm black and I'm sick of all these racist congressmen, the Limbaughs, the Hannitys, Becks, and Palin, who are racist to the core. You don't hear them calling talking about that. Everything the president tries to do as far as jobs and everything else, they're blocking it. The same people that went along with all this garbage with Bush Cheney, they're now talking about the president is not doing when everything he tries to do, they block it. And thank you, Mr. Ecclesham, for taking my call.
Okay. I really appreciate that. Earl, your thoughts about what Eunice had to say.
All right, so that was a caller, and here's how Earl Afari Hutchinson reacts, cut 35.
Oh, and I'm glad she brought that up. That's true. And, Andre, we've had innumerable discussions about how the right side, the GOP, they've done everything under the sun to make this man, this president, and this presidency a failed presidency. And, once again, circling back on something, these right-wing gabbers, the Hannitys, the Limbaughs, and the rest
it should have been rated, softcore porn. But I don't know that maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm not a psychologist, but an eating disorder. I know there's other eating disorders except bulimia, but I don't know where she gets that from. Looking at her, she looks perfectly healthy on the outside. And number two, I don't get the confidence problem. It seems to me, and maybe she's overcompensating, but it seems to me as a layman looking at her, she's got all the self-confidence in the world.
Yeah, I think that Mika probably went a little bit too far. Look, there's been a tremendous reaction to this, and I mean, there was such a reaction to this. I was very shocked by this. My 25-year-old son called me from Tulsa, Oklahoma, to get my sense as to what occurred, and he was really offended by it. So that's a peculiar thing for your kid to call you up to get your opinion.
Right.
I'm flattered by that, but. But I think that for whatever reason, look, Miley Cyrus has represented much more than Britney Spears ever did, a very, very wholesome Disney, let's call it a caricature, but persona, okay? And she's impacted a lot of lives. I mean, she hasn't impacted your life or my life because we're not kids. My daughter was a huge fan of Hannah Montana's. So I think that part of the issue here is there's almost this sense that she's let people down with these antics, that she's moved so far to, for lack of a better term, the dark side, that people aren't just disgusted by it, they're hurt by it, they're offended. I mean, if you grew up with Hannah Montana and you were a young girl or even a young boy, and now all of a sudden she's on stage. I mean, and you looked at the picture of Will and Jada Smith's kids and the expression on their faces, that was terror from them. That wasn't just shock. And I'm looking at the picture right now. The boy looks horrified by what he's watching. Yeah. And it's because what you've got is you've got a pop idol and a tremendously wholesome Disney character turning towards this really kind of raunchy performance. And I think a lot of people were so bothered by it that almost to the point of irrationality. I mean, I saw Michael Medved, who I know you're familiar with.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, he was on CNN yesterday saying, why are we so shocked by this? This is the MTV Video Movie Awards, or Video Music Awards. And this is what, we don't seem to be as offended, and this was his point, we don't seem to be as offended when a 36-year-old married woman does this. But when a 20-year-old single woman does it, we're all getting apoplectic. And, coming from Michael, because I have tremendous amount of respect for him, he's conservative, but he's also, a movie critic.
Absolutely.
So he's been watching entertainers for a long time. He's got a pretty, from our side of the aisle, he's got a pretty good sense of this, you have to admit.
Absolutely, and he's probably got a good point.
I was very surprised. He was like, what's everybody getting so upset about? This is a 20-year-old girl. She's not 14. She said, so he's kind of changed. I mean, I was shocked by it.
Yeah. I was too. And again, and back to Mika a little bit. She, saying that she's disturbed and they never should have allowed her to go on the stage like she's some mental patient and they're exploiting her. I mean, I don't buy that either. But
the whole tongue thing.
The tongue thing.
I mean, if you've been around crazy people, and I'm not just talking liberals, if you've been around crazy people, they do stick their tongue out a lot. I mean, what she was doing with her tongue, and my son mentioned the same thing. What was up with that?
Well, that was, I think that was pretty, an attempt of some sort of sexual, something sexual in nature. I don't think that was an accident or a crazy thing.
I don't know. When you were in your dating years, did you want a woman sticking her tongue out that far at you? I don't know. But we're not that young anymore, so what do we know about dating?
Which means I don't have to answer that question in any way, shape, or form. Well, if we're not talking about lesbians with you, Noel, you're talking about how far I wanted my old girlfriends to stick out their tongue. We're talking to Noel Sheppard, Associate Editor of Newsbusters.org here on the Steve Malzberg Show. One more, and actually two more. MSNBC, the aforementioned network here that we're talking about with Mika, has lost close to 50% of its viewers in a huge news year.
Yeah, and it's actually not MSNBC. It's some of their shows. I mean, the Rachel Maddow show is close to that, and all in with Chris Hayes, he's about 50% down from what Ed Schultz was doing in the same time slot a year ago, and Lawrence O'Donnell is also down about 50%. The slide continues, and at this point, you really have to call it rather epic. The numbers for MSNBC looking atrocious. And I really wonder, and we've been talking about this for months now. It's been collapsing for most of the year. Is it a function of the public has just finally realized that this really is the White House channel, that this isn't news, that this is exclusively propaganda, and the percentage of the population that's recognizing it as propaganda is saying, you know, I have a limited amount of time to watch news. I have a limited amount of time to catch up during the day to find out what happened while I was at work, or taking care of my kids or feeding my kids or whatnot. I really want more than just the Democrat talking points and the White House talking points about what happened today. I really believe that that's the case, and I also believe that the lineup at this point. But clearly, Chris Hayes is not resonating with people. This was a big mistake. He's too young, and nothing against youth. I wish I was as young as him, but although I would wear much nice looking glasses.
There's no appeal. We talked about this before. There's no personality. There's nothing to identify with. He's like a computer that spews out these left-wing facts, quote unquote, or numbers, and he's like a computer to me. He's not. There's no warmth.
There's no warmth. There's no real personality. I think that what Rachel Maddow has, as much as we disagree with her, she does actually have some warmth. I mean, there is, and you're going to find this peculiar, but there is a little bit of cuddliness at times about Rachel. There's nothing, and by the way, there was even at times something cuddly about Ed Schultz.
Now, you see, I could understand the cuddliness in Ed Schultz, but I do find it peculiar about the cuddliness in Rachel, which is my problem, not yours, Noel. Hey, one more, and that is that only now this is huge. I don't know if it speaks more to, and you wrote about this too, when you quoted Peggy Noonan saying that people are going to stop listening to Obama, or they already have. Really, nobody cares what he has to say. But when CNN does a morning show and has the President of the United States on it exclusively, and that show gets 320,000 viewers. That's huge news.
I thought it was, and actually I was kind of surprised that the folks at Drudge didn't jump all over that, but they didn't.
That's all right. I had one yesterday that they didn't, but go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. We're back on the boycott list. But no, when you think about 323,000 people, and this is not going to be any offense to the folks on Fox and Friends, but more than 3 times as many people were watching the folks on Fox and Friends than were watching the President of the United States speak in a one-on-one interview. More people watched MSNBC's Morning Joe than watched the president.
Yeah.
This is really, to me, rather shocking. Although I will tell you, this came up at my athletic club.
Well, no, we're gonna have my fault. I got you involved in a news story, and I don't have. I'm up against a hard break, so I appreciate it. Great segment. We'll speak to you next week. Thank you, my friend.
By the way, wasn't Miley Cyrus up against a hard break? Anyway.
Oh, but and there's no wiener joke there either. On the Steve Malzberg Show on Newsmax TV